Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and a huge thank you to the Cleveland Clinic and the UAE for hosting us here. We actually hosted a really amazing summit in as well in Dubai in April at the Museum of the Future. So it's really good to be back. The community here of builders, of shapers, of scientists is really incredible. A quick question to start off: who is kind of coming here and learning and hearing about DeSci for the first time? Okay, woo! Welcome everyone. So this is good. So just as Sebastian did, I'm also going to lay down some of the basics of decentralized science, what the movement is about, and kind of the different components and things that are being developed. Okay, cool. Here we go. So the title of my talk is Permissionless Science. Maybe a little bit of background about me. I actually spent the early parts of my career, or essentially teenage years, in various online biohacking communities that were very permissionless by design. So diabetes communities, nootropics, longevity. And then from there, during university, got into biotech stock trading, which was a very different experience. And then went like much more closed. And then eventually I found my way into crypto. I think there's a really beautiful synergy that is emerging kind of at the intersection of artificial intelligence, crypto, and biotech. Three very kind of big areas and also buzzwords kind of converging together. But we're seeing glimpses of what we really think permissionless or self-sovereign science could look like. So to start off, so science has really been kind of the engine of progress in our civilization. But the engine has actually been stalling. So we had these huge NIH funding cuts in the US this year and last year that have really stalled progress on the academic level. Many academic labs that we work with had their funding cut. In addition, there's actually an emerging amount of evidence that papers and patents are becoming less and less disruptive over time. There's a funny statistic that 2 out of 3 scientists would kind of completely switch their area of focus, like for funding. And so we looked at Ehrum's law earlier. Like, while we have so much technological progress happening every day, actually the amount of diversity of treatments that are coming to market and kind of the amount of new innovative papers have been declining. Why is that so? So this is a quote from a scientist, one of the first scientists that we ever funded. Scientists spend 80% of their time applying for funding and 20% typically doing the science. And many people that operate labs essentially need to operate like entrepreneurs that kind of pay all of their students, and they need to publish papers continuously in order to continue receiving funding. So outside of the large kind of universities around the globe, most of the world's potential scientific talent, in our view, remains untapped. And that's something that we've really seen emerge with DeSci. Like, we work with so many different labs and universities, scientists across the world that all have amazing ideas, but simply are extremely short on funding. In addition, treatments and recurring revenue really dominate our healthcare system today. So the system that we've created typically needs lifelong customers, and it disincentivizes cures. There's a really famous Goldman Sachs article that asks, is curing patients a sustainable business model? So this analyzed a hepatitis C drug that came to market. So previously there were a lot of hepatitis C treatments on the market, and GlaxoSmithKline launched a novel cure for Hep C, and Goldman Sachs ran this analysis that essentially showed that they shot themselves in the foot by launching a cure. So in the current innovation ecosystem that we have, cures are actually through shareholders disincentivized, right? Like, it's better to keep people sick, to keep them buying products all their life, as opposed to really curing someone. So one fundamental thesis that we have is, like, in an open ecosystem for innovation, where capital naturally, in the earliest stages, is attracted to the best ideas and the most compelling data, cures would more naturally accelerate, as well as scientific innovation more broadly. So very broadly speaking, we live in a time of science friction, not of science fiction. So venture capital, for instance, venture capital investments into biotech have also kind of declined in recent years. Recently, there's a bit of an uptick again. But if we want kind of the picture on the bottom left, there's like a really famous meme: if only the world was if only we did X, then the world could look like this, right? And I actually sincerely believe it's through funding open innovation. So in bringing all this together, what we really need is a permissionless scientific ecosystem where ideas can kind of freely emerge, or like the previous speaker said, like bloom like flowers in the open. And that's really what DeSci is building towards. So decentralized science is a movement that aims to build public infrastructure for funding, creating, reviewing, crediting, storing, and disseminating scientific knowledge fairly and freely using Web3 technology. So what are some of the key verticals? Oh, I also sent a PDF. So what are some of the key verticals of decentralized science? So one of the biggest areas is scientific funding and liquid IP. A second big area are research communities and DAOs. A third really big one is publishing and reproducibility. A fourth is identity and reputation. So all of these are primitives that various organizations in the DeSci space are working on. So what is our broader mission? Molecule's mission. So I come here representing two organizations. So Molecule's mission is really to democratize scientific R&D through tokenizing siloed and inaccessible IP into open data and liquid assets. I'm going to see if we can sort this out, because I feel like every speaker is going to have this issue with PDFs. Oh well. So what's happened over the past couple of years? DeSci has really grown since about 2020, 2021. So one of the first and largest DeSci organizations in the space is VitaDAO. The previous speaker also spoke about VitaDAO. VitaDAO is actually focused on this intersection of long bio. So about 20 million collectively in treasuries have been raised across the ecosystem. The ecosystem fluctuates at around a $200 million global market cap. So these are all from individual organizations that have been launched over time, individual tokenized research projects, or much more recently, AI agents. Can we fix the slides?
I was going to say, we are fixing the slides. We're just moving over to the PDF. So
Yeah,
everyone give us a minute. Yeah.
Poetry slam? Who wants to start? Does Trump ever speak about science? Why? Yeah, not often, eh?
Okay, we should be sorted out.
Can't they just make it full screen?
No, there's technical difficulties, but so you'll just have to scroll. I think. Okay, we're good.
Oh, fantastic, cool. Problem solved. So over time, over the years, we've attracted some industry giants into the space. So Pfizer Ventures, for instance, led VitaDAO's last funding round together with former Coinbase CTO Balaji. We have many members, actually, or founders from Y Combinator that have joined kind of our space. Binance's family office, CZ's family office, Easy Labs is an investor into bio. We do a lot of work actually with the MIT. And so what unites all of these kind of industry giants that are slowly entering the space is really the hunt for innovation and community-centric biotech. And so I represent two organizations. One is Molecule, which is really this protocol for on-chain scientific IP. So we turn siloed research into liquid markets that are powered by open data, right? If we have to consider that the entire intellectual property system is still based on the patent system ultimately, right? And that was developed in the early 18th century, no, late 18th century. And there was one major reform in the 1950s, and since then we've used that as the base layer for innovation. And so one of the big technical innovations, and I'll get to that in a bit, is like tokenizing IP and data on chain, and essentially creating highly mobile and liquid data rooms or liquid labs. And who is the largest user of that? It's the ecosystem of BioDAOs that have emerged. And Bio is a curation and liquidity launchpad for these scientific communities. So we combine decentralized finance with decentralized science to enable these communities to like raise capital, flourish, and also to govern them. Right. So Molecule consists of three core components that essentially enable decentralized funding and governance of individual translational research projects. So we have a protocol that utilizes something called an IP NFT, and then an IPT, which by now can actually represent real world assets. So essentially, you can have development companies that can file for patents, that can also issue tokens, though, that enable communities of people, retail, consumers, to participate in what these companies are developing. Then there's an IP marketplace where IP can be freely exchanged, and the largest users of this are the BioDAOs. The core primitives of this, just mentioned that, are IP NFTs, which can be split up into their individual units. These can then be exchanged for work or for funding. So what is a BioDAO? We heard the previous speaker mention this. BioDAOs essentially create value by building on-chain IP portfolios, not dissimilar to what a biotech or a pharma company would do. So you have a community that forms with researchers, scientists from all over the globe. I think at peak, for instance, VitaDAO had over 30,000 members in its Discord that were all actively contributing ideas, novel research proposals, evaluating them, and then funding them using a treasury that the DAO has. So these DAOs can issue tokens. The tokens then become publicly traded, and community members use these tokens to essentially govern which research proposals to fund. So this is an example of VitaDAO's current IP portfolio. So on the one side, you can see different IP NFTs that have been funded over time. Typically, a DAO first funds like an individual research project, so you can see these as like on-chain patents. And if the research progresses really successfully, those can then be follow-on tokenized. VitaDAO's also done several equity investments over time, many of which have raised follow-on financing or actually were acquired by industry players. And two of the leading IPTs are actually in very advanced discussion for clinical trials with a major government. So this would be a worldwide first, that actually an online community has funded a new therapeutic up to clinical trials. So bio in all of this is sort of, if you're familiar with biotech or with Roivant, is kind of like a Roivant of DeSci. So bio represents a growing portfolio of all of these DAOs and intellectual property assets that are backed by cutting-edge science. And that number of DAOs, the number of individual IPTs that the ecosystem is issuing, the number of agents in the ecosystem is continuously growing. So just over the last 9 months, no, over the last 12 months, that ecosystem has raised about 12 million in additional financing and has launched, I think, 11 new organizations. And besides that, around 50, 60 individual new IPT and research tokens were issued. So together, this is like really a growing ecosystem map. We have organizations in synthetic biology. There's one in quantum biology, stem cell research, rare diseases, psychedelic research, fertility research. We have a DAO called Spine DAO, which is started by 30 of the world's best spine surgeons. If any of you are going to Breakpoint, they're actually hosting an activation there where they analyze your spine and offer kind of therapeutic approaches if you suffer from back pain or things like that. There's men's sexual health, chronic diseases, and then there's a huge cluster in longevity. And so we see this ecosystem like gradually expanding. We see a big kind of expansion with every major kind of crypto cycle because science is expensive. And on the other side, though, many of the organizations on here are actually beginning to deliver real-world results. And so go-to-market is extremely important. Here are kind of like is an overview of kind of some of the tokens that you can find in Bio or that have been launched through Bio. And so Bio, in the sense, can be seen on the one side as a launchpad ecosystem and infrastructure to enable founders and scientific researchers all over the globe to launch. And on the other side, it actively manages a whole portfolio and can be seen as like a decentralized, ever-growing protocol-owned fund. So I mentioned this earlier, IPTs in this ecosystem. So this is like the most atomic research unit, can be exchanged for work, funding, or contributions from the demand side. And a really good example is actually VitaFast, which is an autophagy activator drug that we funded in 2021 with Newcastle University. So this is initially it raised 620,000. It was 2,000% oversubscribed. And since then, it's identified molecules that are 10 to 100 times more potent than rapamycin. So rapamycin, if you're familiar, is one of the leading longevity drugs. Is one of the ones that we have the best data on and is kind of being taken off label. And it's showing a 30% higher clearance rate in aged cells. And it's about to start its first in-human clinical trial. We have several other projects like this. So there's a lot bubbling under the surface if you go and peek into all of these individual research projects. And one really big question that we've asked ourselves, though, because token and crypto are very end consumer facing. So how does DeSci go to the end consumer? So Bio is launching a sort of Shopify for community-driven scientific e-commerce. And this is a really big trend. This kind of like don't trust, verify, like decentralized e-commerce for consumer health. So health is one of the largest online search categories with 400 to 600 million daily searches. And we think that AI agents will soon begin guiding consumer behavior. 46% of consumers reject products that lack clear evidence. And so we believe that DeSci communities can actually show pre-qualified demand for end consumer products. Token incentives can help scale organic demand. One quick question, how much of you spend a significant amount of their disposable income on things like supplements or longevity therapeutics already? Wow, okay, that's much more than expected. So that's almost I'd say, 60, 70% of the room. So I continuously also got back to this question of and then having to order your supplements on Amazon, the suppliers often change. I would love to have lab tested, qualified suppliers where I essentially have other community members who are actual scientists that backing that up, right? I think provenance, for instance, for lab tests would make for a much better end consumer health experience. And then on the other side, I'm actually personally really interested in developing my own stacks and my own supplements. Not my own supplements per se, but combination therapeutics. I'll get to an experiment we ran this morning in a little bit. So one DAO that is up and coming that we're launching is DermaDAO. DermaDAO's goal is really to democratize access to skincare products and develop entirely new serums and skincare medicine. It's a very skincare is a huge topic for many people. It's also one of the biggest spending items. But the large skincare companies actually don't have, first of all, they don't have very sophisticated R&D arms. So the amount of innovation actually that you see with new skincare products hitting the market is relatively low in terms of what could be done. On the other side, it's very difficult to verify some claims that some of these companies are making. Often a lot of it is marketing, 70-80% of it is marketing and 20% is actually focused on efficacy. We want to focus much more on efficacy. And so you can do community-based data collection. And DermaDAO, for instance, is an example of an organization that is directly moving to market with a product. So they're about to launch 2 products. One is a longevity serum that utilizes ferulic acid and very high dose vitamin C and vitamin E. and the other one is a completely UV filter that is entirely mineral-based, because increasingly it's showing that the typical UV filters that are being used in a lot of sunscreens can be carcinogenic. So what you kind of get out of this, so we talked earlier about IPTs. Ultimately, what is being developed, like one path to the end consumer, one is obviously partnering with industry, partnering with pharma. Another path to the end consumer is an emerging set of products that are emerging in the ecosystem. I'll give a shout out here also to Brian Majewski, the founder of Cerebrum DAO, which is focused on neurodegenerative diseases. And for instance, they have a supplement. I've tried it myself. It's called Percepta. It's developed by a Stanford scientist, and it's showing extremely promising data in the early treatments of Alzheimer's. Brian, are you going to speak about it later? Okay, fantastic. So one last thing that we really asked ourselves is like, how can scientific product and drug development in the ecosystem really accelerate? Over the years, we partnered with a lot of universities, a lot of labs, and who here has previously worked with a tech transfer office at a large university? Okay, also a fair amount of people. What was your experience like? No, bueno. Exactly. It's incredibly slow. Yes, so really long turnaround times. And in some cases, we also often found that the science that you can actually get out of that, or the patentable IP, is not even that good. So for all the amount of effort that you have to put in, all the legwork, the legal work. And so increasingly, we actually found how can we enable the scientists in our ecosystem, or even kind of the creators in our ecosystem, to like rapidly advance ideas to market? And how can the ecosystem itself come up with really good ideas? And so one is obviously, like, one thing needed to accelerate is instant capital. That's one of the things that bio has really solved. Like even just recently, despite the slight crypto market downturn, we had a sale that was raising 50,000, and it was 14x oversubscribed. So there's a lot of demand to like move into scientific innovation. The other big one is automated idea generation. And so we have this fundamental hypothesis that scientific agents will automate core research functionalities and enable anyone to develop scientific products. So over the last year, we've developed a framework called bioagents, and these agents can generate thousands of hypotheses. Other agents can then rank, evaluate, and design experimental plans and prioritize them. Humans around the globe can interact with these ideas and provide key feedback for tokenized rewards. And then capital allocation among this like network of ideas that emerges, even before you tokenize them, capital allocation can decide the most promising path out in the open. And then we can essentially create automated pipelines, which some we'll hear from Benji later from Pump Science. So essentially automated experimental pipelines. This is one of our flagship AI agents. So it's the first decentralized bio agent for longevity research. It combines thousands of papers out of the longevity space, and it kind of represents Aubrey de Grey, which is one of the most famous longevity kind of scientists of our time. So the agent combines thousands of papers that are stored in a decentralized knowledge graph, together with a lot of unpublished emails, work, grant applications that he's written over time, talks he's given, all of his papers, to essentially form an extremely opinionated scientific agent. If you think about most LLMs, they tend to be very generalist, right? And that's often why why LLMs are actually difficult to come up with entirely novel research, because they're not very opinionated. They're designed to like agree with you. So instead, what bio agents really try to do is they try to impersonate like a very specific scientist with their opinion on the world and their worldview. Aubrey was launched in August. I think we'll hear a little bit more about Aubrey later and all the work that he represents. He is a steward of Aubrey's RMR2 study, which is the largest mouse rejuvenation study. So the funding and liquidity and volume that Aubrey is producing as a token is directly funding Aubrey de Grey's work and producing completely novel early stage basic research data. And so anyone can also, so it's also a chat terminal. So anyone can prompt Aubrey and generate novel hypotheses in public, refine them. And then we're just rolling this out in later stages, launch products with Aubrey on Bio. So these were some screenshots from the early days. Aubrey would respond, could respond to Brian Johnson, for instance, around the science there. And so Aubrey would automatically respond to people prompting it in public on X. It would also, in some cases, just respond to other scientists, and that drove a lot of public participation. So you could speak to Aubrey and say, "Give me a novel hypothesis about epigenetic reprogramming," and he would do a complete literature review, give you all of the sources, and generate a novel hypothesis in public, and other people could debate that. So what we've developed from that is really like a bioagent hypothesis to IPT-funded workflow. So you can have a hypothesis, an agent-collaborated hypothesis in public that generates a proof of invention. So a kind of a time-marked stamp on chain for the development of this idea. And then later on, you can launch an IPT around that. So since then, 2 IPTs have launched from researchers in the VitaDAO community, where Aubrey essentially defines, together with the researchers, an entire experimental plan, a whole literature review, and really refines the project. The latest project that was launched, I think, was funded collectively with 150K, focused on a novel, also RNA therapeutic, FOXO. It's called FOXO3, if you want to look it up. And the next kind of workflow that we see in that is kind of this open idea formulation. So this is one that we just did this morning. So we said, develop a sleep optimization supplement formulation based on the following target compounds and dosages using magnesium L-threonate, 1.5 grams of taurine, 1.5 grams of glycine, and 4 grams of L-theanine. And so it analyzes the combination of this. This is a supplement stack, for instance, I personally take for sleep. It works really well, can highly recommend it. But like, why would I be able to recommend it? Because there's no data on that combination, right? It's just like, and it's also personalized, right? So another big element that these agents will be able to bring in is elements of personalized medicine. So we gave it the goal to conduct a thorough literature review on each of the compounds' mechanism of action, GABA modulation, neurological recovery, and identify clinical trials testing these compounds individually or in combination. And then the desired output being a mechanistically grounded formulation rationale with citations along with recommended adjustments and an experimental protocol. And so within minutes, it completes a comprehensive literature review. It looks at all of the critical evidence gaps in do we have evidence for this already? Yes, we have evidence for this, or do we not have evidence for something? And then it suggests kind of the next steps, which would be a comprehensive trial registry search, identifying GMP certified suppliers, contract manufacturers, and essentially how a first trial around this could be run. So first, it analyzes the formulation idea that you have, and then gives you really experimental design plan. And then you can continue further and further developing that. And so the next step for us is really for anyone to be able to launch these things, get input from the community on whether their idea is good, right? And we always put it into like a very refined and like peer-reviewed prompting framework with the agent. And you can then fund it, right? So next step would be collecting 25, 50K in funding from the public to test whether the supplement stack could work. So bringing it all together, we're building towards a world where scientists spend 80% doing the science and 20% applying for funding. We're building towards a world where science becomes permissionless, self-sovereign, and autonomous. What I really like about kind of this idea of like agent-powered idea generation and testing is that like one of you could sit down at home, like on a Thursday night, a friend tells you what supplements are you taking, like how do you combine them, or like maybe there's something novel that you've heard about. You could spend 1 or 2 hours communicating with Aubrey and like launch a scientific experiment kind of through our framework of partners. You're not responsible now for looking for the CROs. Like VitaDAOs can find all of the lab partners and research partners, and the public, if they deem it worthy, funds your experiment. And a world where anyone can fund and participate in science, independent of institution and geography. Thank you.